Welcome to Alumni Reunion. My name is Kim Hunt-Rao. I'm the Executive Director for Advancement at the Faculty of Arts and Science, and it's a pleasure to welcome you here today. As is tradition at gatherings such as this at U of T, we start by acknowledging the land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Wendat Nation, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this meeting place is still home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. Welcome back to school. I have to say, it is on brand for U of T students to choose to be in a lecture on a sunny Friday in June. Forever studious and curious, but we're very glad that you made this choice, and this is going to be a really great lecture. We have a fantastic speaker today. What I can promise you is there's no homework, so that's an improvement from your time at U of T, unless our speaker gives you some. So behave. Maybe if you come sit in the front seat, she won't give you any. We'll see. Our speaker today is Professor Morgan Barense, who holds the Max Gianna Glassman Chair in Neurophysiology and is the director of the Toronto Neuroimaging Facility with the Department of Psychology here at U of T. Professor Barense received her BA from Harvard and her PhD from the University of Cambridge, where she completed postdoctoral work with the Peterhouse Research Fellowship. She joined the faculty at U of T in 2009. She's trained in animal neuroscience, human neuropsychology, fMRI, and cognitive psychology. She enjoys bringing these approaches together to study the neural underpinnings of memory. Now, hold tight, this is a long list. Morgan has been honored with a number of domestic and international awards, including a Canada Research Chair in Cognitive Neuroscience, a Young Investigator Award from the Cognitive Neuroscience Society, an Early Investigator Award and Lifetime Fellowship with the Society of Experimental Psychologists, an Early Career Award from the Canadian Society for Brain, Behavior, and Cognitive Science, a James S. McDonald Foundation Scholar Award, an Early Researcher Award from the province of Ontario, and a Knott Innovation Award. Suffice to say, she knows what she's talking about. And without further ado, please join me in welcoming Professor Morgan Barense.
All right. Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah, wonderful. All right, well, thank you for that very generous introduction. It's a pleasure to be here to talk to you about some work that we've been doing in my lab over the past decade or so. So the premise of this work was this recognition that basic science, neuroscientists, psychologists were making really great strides in terms of understanding how memory works. But not a lot of these theoretical advances were being translated out of the lab back into the real world to create practical solutions for people who wanted to make their memory better. So in the research program that I'm going to be telling you about today is our first step in trying to address that. So we all know that experience of a memory cue propelling us back in time, enabling the rich re-experiencing of an event as though it were happening all over again. So this is a phenomenon that has fascinated scientists and artists alike, inspiring clips like this one from the Disney Pixar classic, Ratatouille. So here we have this grumpy restaurant critic, takes a bite of this dish that's been implausibly prepared by a rat, and he is suddenly propelled back to the warmth of his childhood home in the French countryside. Now, most of us can relate to these compelling moments when there is some powerful memory cue that bowls us over with nostalgia for times past. But we also experience this on a much smaller scale of every single day. Subtle memory cues are constantly triggering the reactivation of past experiences, and this helps us not only relive moments, but also make decisions and feel connected to our own lives. Now, this type of memory is what we as memory scientists call autobiographical episodic memory. It's memory for the unique, event-specific details that allow us to distinguish one life event from another life event. So countless studies have established that this kind of memory, this episodic memory, is vulnerable to healthy aging, to neurological injury, or even just the simple passage of time. Now, by contrast, semantic information, which refers to details or facts that are shared across many different events, is much more robust. It's much more stable and less likely to be lost. So let me make this concrete. Imagine this situation. We've got a grandmother and she sees a toy truck and she might immediately think of her grandson and the fact that he loves to play with trucks. But the problem is that she has experienced many episodes of him playing with trucks. So there was this time when he used his garbage truck to haul Legos, or another time when he took his beloved tow truck down to the cottage and used it to fish for minnows in the lake. So she might have a hard time remembering these episodic details that are specific to each of these different moments and keep these events separate in her memory. So she can remember all sorts of information that's common across the events, like her grandson's name, the fact that he loves trucks, but the individual episodes themselves are no longer differentiated. And as a result, she loses the ability not only to mentally re-experience these meaningful moments, but she also misses the chance to draw on her memory for these meaningful moments, to guide her decisions and her behavior in the present, to deepen her social connections, and even maintain a coherent sense of her own identity that's grounded in the experiences that she's had in her life. So these kinds of declines in episodic memory have been linked to the health and the integrity of a brain structure called the hippocampus. So as hippocampal integrity declines, memory representations lose their distinctiveness because those details that are unique to each of the different events are lost. And this kind of memory loss can make our worlds feel a lot smaller. So being able to draw on our memories from the events of our lives is important not only for adapting to new situations, but also for sustaining social circles and even preserving our sense of self. So if you just think about it, if you bump into somebody that you haven't seen in a while, what's one of the first things that you're going to do to establish a connection? You're probably going to share a memory. And when we can't recall these specific experiences, we start to lose those bridges that connect us to other people and to our own identity as individuals. So one promising approach to mitigate this kind of memory loss in the real world is something called digital memory augmentation via life logging. So with digital memory augmentation, portable devices capture photos and videos of everyday events that users can later review to trigger their memory. But when we started this work, and still to this day, we recognized that there was a bit of a huge gap here, actually, that there aren't many life logging solutions out there that are specifically aimed at improving memory. And those that are have really complicated interfaces that weren't designed with older adults or people who have memory impairments in mind. So that's what my lab set out to change. So since 2015, we have been working to develop and validate and advance a smartphone-based application that's directly inspired by how the brain supports memory. So the result is what we lovingly call HippoCamera, a digital memory aid that mimics key functions of the hippocampus, allowing it to scaffold the consolidation of recent memories. So what is HippoCamera? At its core, the app has these two primary functions that allow users to record and replay everyday life events. We designed it to be extremely simple so that it would be intuitive for older adults and those who had memory impairments. So first, it takes users through a quick, less than a minute, multi-step, intentional encoding process in which users create a rich memory cue. And then later, the app prompts users to review these cues in short replay sessions that link together different memories and strengthen those associations across memories. So memory is all about this rich, interconnected web of experiences. We're trying to reinforce that here with HippoCamera. Okay, so let me go into each of these functions in a bit more detail. So let's say that there's some event happening that a user wants to remember. They're going to pull out their phone and they're going to press the large record memory button. Then they're prompted to capture a 24-second video snippet that captures details that are going to help them remember that event. And then they're going to record an 8-second verbal description of the event. And we ask them to just focus on what makes this event special or unique. We're really trying to train users to work on paying attention to those distinguishing features of a memory. And then they can choose to add a title or additional details, and then they put the phone away and go back about their lives. But in the background, HippoCamera is combining these different elements together to make a compact multimodal cue that takes that 24 seconds of video, speeds it up, and overlays the 8-second audio tag. And this is creating a highly distinctive cue that has lots of properties that we know are really good at triggering memory. So first, what we're trying to do is optimize what we call memory encoding. So this guided recording process means that memory encoding, when we're laying down that memory, people are being intentional about it. We're trying to force our users to stop and pay attention to the event, to mark what makes it different, and to reflect on it in that moment. And because these cues are selectively captured, we're not just indiscriminately capturing photographs or videos, users have to choose to capture an event. So our users tell us that they're going through their days more attentively because as they're having any given moment, they have to decide, is this the thing that I want to capture today? Is this event the thing that I want to remember? So there's this generalized kind of paying attention to everything a little bit better. Memory and attention are best friends. I always say that. Okay, so that's the one side, the recording side. Then the other side is the replay side. So we later replay these cues using all sorts of principles that we know optimize memory. So for starters, one of the first empirical findings in experimental psychology came from a German gentleman named Ebbinghaus. And indeed, the seminar series in the psychology department is called the Ebbinghaus Empire. So one of the first findings that empirical findings in my field was that it's best to study in short sessions that are distributed across time rather than a long session of cramming. So the students who have exams, you should know you should not cram. That is not a good way. I mean, sometimes you have to, but it's not a good way to learn information in the long term. You want to study in short little snippets distributed across time. So with HippoCamera, our users are getting these occasional reminders to replay their memory cues throughout the day in these really short sessions. So I'm going to show you a replay session. And I'm sure as you look at the videos, you're going to be wondering who these absolutely adorable children are. I'll break the suspense, they're mine. My mom is an avid HippoCamera user. She's always been our first person who pilots out anything new, and she's generously agreed to share a few memories from one of her visits up here. So you just get a little sneak peek into my life. Okay, so each of the 5 events in a replay session is preceded by a timestamp that gives some temporal context about when the event happened. And we know this is a powerful memory cue. Knowing when something happened is like a bit of information to situate an event in the long line of events that happen to us. It's a way, again, to differentiate that event from all of the other things that are happening. Okay, so they get the timestamp, and then it goes. You're going to get to see some pictures of Stony Lake.
Last day of our holiday, Anders and Freya helped gas up the tinny. Now we're heading back to the cottage for a barbecue and a nap. Anders is using his truck to fish for minnows. Soren's cooling us down with his water gun, looking for friendly critters. It's a gorgeous night for roasting marshmallows. About to go on a sunset cruise. So excited to be starting our holiday. Soren just found Anders this dump truck as we were walking home from the pool. He's using it to haul all the Legos. We opened up the cottage for the May long weekend. The water's chilly, but Anders has his wetsuit and wants to take his digger for a dip.
And there you have it. And so at the end, there's this little screen where we're asking people to just kind of stop and reflect. You can press in and revisit any of these memories. So as you were watching those videos, you might have noticed that the videos were speeded up by a factor of 3. And what we were doing there, we were inspired by something that happens naturally in the brain, an endogenous property of hippocampal function. So the hippocampus replays memories that it encoded in a high speed to the rest of the brain. It's almost like the hippocampus is trying to teach the rest of the brain these memories. And it does so by playing them on fast forward. And then the rest of the brain is thought to slowly kind of learn these memories so that the hippocampus is no longer needed to represent them. And this is thought to be a really important aspect of what we call memory consolidation, getting those memories to stick in the brain. And so what we were trying to do is just loosely mimic that process here with these replay sessions. On a purely practical level, speeding up these videos just makes the review sessions really fast. So we can get through these 5 events in less than a minute, just getting through this content more efficiently. Okay, so I just want to take a moment here to ask you to appreciate, yeah?
But you read any of the memory aspect or something like that, it takes a little bit different approach to like voice. Well,
I think that might be what I'm about to say here. Yeah. So I mean, we speed it up, but we're not taking away information. So it's about like quality over quantity. So HippoCamera is really different from using your phone camera in the typical way. So when we use our phones, we often take this kind of hoarding, well, I don't want to speak for any of you, but me and a lot of my close friends and loved ones, their phones look a lot like that, right? So, you know, we focus on capturing every single second. You know, I've got to catch the smile. I've got to catch them diving off the diving board. And we disconnect from that moment. And then to make matters worse, we often, you know, we have all of these photos and videos, but we never even go back and look at them. So HippoCamera is taking the opposite approach. So we're capturing just this really short cue. It's this tiny little snippet of the event, just the tip of the iceberg. And then we're crafting this memory cue to trigger that whole event in memory, something we call pattern completion in the memory world. So we're giving a really rich cue, and the idea is that when people see that cue, the rest of the memory is going to come along with it. And we bring these memory cues together into these curated replay sessions that are offering this structured reminiscence. So it's quick, but it's also effective, and you get a lot more. We always say, you know, it's not about remembering just those 24 seconds that you captured. It's the whole thing that came on either side of it, and that's what a good memory. Maybe that's what you were getting at. Is a good memory cue isn't. It shouldn't be the whole thing again. It should be like a little bit of a Rosetta Stone. Like, how can I use this to complete the whole experience from it? Okay, so that's HippoCamera. We built it, and then we didn't know if it was going to work. We hoped it would. And this was about 9 years ago that it was first built, and then we had to embark on a lot of really hard work to get it to a place where we could put it into the hands of members of the community and ask them to test it. And we had a lot of work to do to understand how this repeated exposure to these really high fidelity cues was going to affect memory, and if it would even improve memory in the ways that we hoped that it would. So I'm going to talk about 3 studies today that we conducted to address these questions. beginning with just the kind of the table stakes, where we ran some intervention studies, starting with a lovely group of community dwelling older adults, and then moving on to a case, an individual who had really severe amnesia. Okay, so for these studies, my postdocs at the time, they're now both have their own labs. They've grown up and moved out and are doing great things in science. Chris Martin and Brian Hong, they worked with healthy community dwelling older adults who had no diagnosis of a memory disorder. So first we ran a 2-week intervention in which participants recorded and replayed 5 events per day. And in hindsight, that was totally naive. We were naive in thinking that there would be 5 meaningful events each day that were even worth remembering in the first place. I don't know if that's depressing. It's just kind of the way life works. Because if you stop and think about it, how many truly distinct events do you have in any given day that you actually want to remember? And, unless you're on some like terrific holiday, it's probably not 5. Our participants were absolute champs, but we ended up with a lot of like really generic, repetitive events devoid of any of these episodic details, like filming your cup of coffee in the morning or going out to shovel the driveway, and yet again, another snowstorm. And these aren't events that were distinctive, or there wasn't really much episodic juice there for the app to squeeze. So then we regrouped and we ran a 10-week intervention in which we slowed things down and we trained our participants to focus on capturing just one thing worth remembering. And I sort of describe this as like your souvenir for the day. What's the thing that makes today special? What's the thing about today that you want to remember? And then to replay just once per day. And this was far more manageable. So after they had done either those 2 weeks or those 10 weeks, we brought them in 1 week after they had stopped using HippoCamera and they'd turned their phones in. We brought them into the lab and we tested them on their memory for those recorded events. And I'm going to call that the immediate recall session. And then 1 week after that, we brought them into the Toronto Neuroimaging facility, our neuroimaging center that we have here in the Department of Psychology on campus. And they completed an fMRI session. And then finally, 3 months after that, after they totally stopped using HippoCamera, participants came back into the lab for a second test of their memory for these recorded events. And I'll be calling this delayed recall. Okay, so just backing up a bit, there are 2 conditions in our design. There's what we're calling this replayed condition and a hidden baseline control. So in our critical replay condition, each memory cue was replayed on average 9 times, distributed, again, drawing from Ebbinghaus, distributed over those 2 weeks or those 10 weeks. But in order to assess the benefit of replay with HippoCamera, we have to compare memory for those replayed events to something else. And so for that, we have a baseline control condition in which the cues were hidden. So that is, our participants captured these memory cues, but they never saw them again until they were tested at cued recall. And I just want to note, this is a really conservative baseline that I think leads us to underestimate the benefits of HippoCamera. And that's because those events that were captured in this hidden condition still benefited from that enriched encoding environment of HippoCamera. They were still captured with that intentionality and that extra attention. But we had to compare memory to something, and like short of like sneaking around and covertly filming our participants and being generally creepy, this seemed like the best option. Okay, so to test their memory for the event, we administered a modified version of a really famous memory test called the autobiographical interview. It was developed by my colleague here in Toronto, Brian Levine. So what we did, we showed them their cue without the timestamp, and we asked them to tell us everything they could remember beyond what was apparent from the cue alone. So we might get a response like this. So this is my mom's response. So that was about halfway through our week at the cottage. The cottage is on Stony Lake. I just spotted a big black water snake. So I brought the kids down to look for it. Soren was on the rock. The shallow water was teeming with minnows, and Anders used his tow truck to try to fish for them, and so on and so forth. Okay, so we took these narratives, and then this incredible team of undergraduate research assistants in my lab painstakingly quantified the specific details that were provided. So first, we're not going to count any details that are directly discernible from the cue alone. So you can tell that in the audio tag, if you remember, she says that Anders was using his truck to fish for minnows, and Soren's on the big rock. You can see that in the picture. Then we're going to look at this split between semantic and episodic details. So the semantic details reflect those facts that are shared across different events, like the fact that Anders really loves trucks. In contrast, the episodic details are unique to that particular event. So like the fact that she had just spotted this big black water snake, and my mom, being kind of a crazy fun grandmother, brought the kids down to the lake to look for the water snake. So it's memory for these episodic details that is thought to be dependent on the hippocampus. And these are the things that we're trying to target with HippoCamera. Those events, those details that bring you back to that specific moment and make it distinct from all the other times that she's played with trucks with Anders. Okay, so this example that I've shown here reflects really strong episodic recollection. This is what one of the most famous memory scientists from Toronto, Endel Tulving, famously coined mental time travel. Recollecting these vivid details brings you right back in time. It's this time machine that we have in our brain, enabling us to almost experience the event all over again. Now, in contrast, many of our memories don't look like that. Many of our memories lack these event-specific details. So here's an example of the same event, and I've just kind of rewritten it to be devoid of those episodic details. So there might be some grounding detail. This was during our cottage holiday, and then it's just a bunch of facts. The cottage is on Stony Lake. My grandkids love to play in the water, and I often join them. It's a blessing to get time with them up there. So there's details there, but there's very little that is specific to that particular moment in time. And it's often precisely these rich, unique moments that people most want to remember. And so that's what we're aiming to support with HippoCamera. Okay, so what did we find? I apologize for this graph, but for simplicity, I've combined results from the 2-week and the 10-week intervention, since the outcomes were nearly identical. Okay, so what I'm going to be showing you here are the details. Can you see that? Okay, yeah, great. The details that people remembered, depending on if they were in the baseline condition or the replayed condition, and split according to whether those details were semantic in nature or if they were episodic in nature. Let's look first to the semantic details, and the critical comparison here is for those baseline memories relative to our control condition, relative to our experimental condition, the replayed. And it's a big null effect. There is no benefit from replay for these semantic details. That is, replaying didn't lead people to recall more facts about the events. And that was the case whether we tested them immediately after the intervention or if we waited an extra 3 months. But I wouldn't be standing up here excited to share these results if the story wasn't different for episodic details. So immediately 1 week after using HippoCamera, we found that every single participant remembered more episodic details for the events that they had replayed. And that same pattern held when we tested them 3 months later. So they hadn't had any access to these cues. 3 months later, every single participant showed a benefit of replay with HippoCamera in terms of their recall of these episodic details. And I have never before and never since ran a study where every single participant did exactly what we hoped that they would do. So this was really, really exciting. I always joke, like, this should have been the moment that I retired because it was all downhill after this. But also, the magnitude of the benefit is quite substantial and likely to be clinically meaningful. So we found a boost of 57.5% when we're comparing just in terms of the percent benefit of the replayed relative to the baseline events. And so also I do want to emphasize that when we were first starting this study, a lot of participants would say, well, I'm nervous about kind of outsourcing my memory to my phone, something that we call cognitive offloading. Like, I don't want my memory to become dependent on my phone. And we didn't want that either. And so that's why we were so encouraged by these delayed memory results, because those memories were in their brains. They had no longer had access to their phones. We'd taken their HippoCamera phones away from them. So that means that HippoCamera it's tapping into the memory systems that are already there for participants and supporting them and making their memories better. Okay. So I'm a cognitive neuroscientist, and I know that memory, a huge part of this is happening in the brain, and I wanted to understand how replay might be affecting how the brain stores these memories. Specifically, starting from this hypothesis that replay is going to make these memories more distinct from one another. We're going to keep those memories separate from one another. So we brought them into to Tony, the Toronto Neuroimaging Facility. And in the scanner, participants would first watch their video cue, and then they would be asked to reflect. They'd be given a probe word, and we asked them to reflect on a specific aspect of the event. So here, the probe word is snake, and we'd say yes or no, does this word have to do with the event? And here the answer would be yes, because there was that big black water snake. We did this for all of the memories that had been replayed and for all the memories that had been hidden. And what we do is we measure the patterns of activity in the brain or in a specific brain structure for each memory cue, and we compare it to all of the other memory cues in that condition. We're doing that for the replayed trials, and we're also doing that for the hidden trials. And this gives us a measure of how clearly the brain is keeping these different memories separate from one another. So how much merging of the memories is there? Does it look more like this, where the memories are overlapping, or are they more distinctive based on whether the memories had been replayed or if they had been hidden? So we were looking specifically in the hippocampus. That was our focused region of interest, this part of the brain that we know is critical for episodic memory. And we found that replayed events triggered these more distinctive neural patterns than the events that had been hidden. And we found that this really mattered for memory. So we measured how distinct each person's hippocampal activity was, and we compared that to how many details, episodic details, they were able to later remember. And we found that people whose hippocampi showed these more distinctive patterns, they were able to produce more episodic details on that autobiographical interview. But this wasn't true for the semantic information. How distinct the hippocampal representations were didn't affect their ability to remember the facts. So we're getting at mechanism here, and we're suggesting that HippoCamera might help to strengthen memory by making each memory stand out more clearly in a person's hippocampus. And this is going to support the better recall of the kinds of details that make memories vivid and allow us to mentally relive them. Okay, so when we first created HippoCamera, our idea was that the replay sessions could stand in for some of the functions of a damaged hippocampus. So we literally called it HippoCamera. We were trying to mimic what the hippocampus does. So the idea is that by repeatedly reactivating these events in a way that a healthy hippocampus does through hippocampal replay, that phenomenon that I talked at the beginning, maybe it could stand in for somebody who has a damaged hippocampus. So if we can replay these memories in a way that a damaged hippocampus cannot, maybe we can facilitate this transfer of information from the hippocampus to other parts of the brain in people who have brain damage. So we were very excited when we had the opportunity to work with a young, wonderful woman who goes by the initials LP, at least for scientific purposes. So LP developed temporal lobe encephalitis due to a viral infection, which left her really profoundly amnesic. And you can see on her scan here. So we scanned her again at Tony, and we confirmed that she has these bilateral lesions to her hippocampus. There's just cerebral spinal fluid there where normally there would be intact tissue, and you can see that here on this slice. And so she has near total ablation of her hippocampus and only some slight sparing of her anterior hippocampus. And when we first started working with LP, we noticed that she really diligently kept a diary. She would often, it was this notebook, this dog-eared, well-loved, and she would often turn to these specific pages that she'd marked with a Post-it note, and she would point to it and share it with us, and it reflected a memory. You know, she would use these memories that she documented in her diary to build connections, to make a conversation. It was literally, she was using these memories to make kind of social bids to the people that she was talking to. And so that was really profound for me. It was clear she was motivated to better remember things, and she had her own system. And so that seemed like a really good baseline that we could compare HippoCamera against. So this is this is a page from her diary that she was fine with sharing with us. She says, going to Toronto for an appointment. She was getting her brain scanned. Rachel, so kind and caring and beautiful. Rachel was my research associate at the time, asking questions about my memory. We had lunch together, and then she went in for the brain scan. So this was her documenting of this day. And then she also used HippoCamera. And so when we tested her, we showed her either an excerpt from her diary like this, or we showed her one of her HippoCamera memory cues. And we asked her just to describe as much as she could about the events. So for both of these events that she captured with HippoCamera or with her diary, she was able to produce, semantic details for the different events. However, in terms of episodic details, she was often unable to produce any episodic information for diary events. So, she's shown these cues, and we, like this page here, and we say, okay, what do you remember about this? And all she can say is like, I really like a veggie chicken wrap. I have a problem with my memory, and just kind of fact, nothing specific about that event at all. However, for the events that she captured with HippoCamera, she was reliably able to produce at least one detail. So with HippoCamera, she went from remembering almost nothing to remembering something. So I'm not saying that we cured her amnesia by any stretch of the imagination, but you can imagine the difference that would make. If you go from having nothing that is unique to a specific event to having one thing, that's a really big swing for a person. And even more than that, there was one anecdote that really stood out for us. So LP's mother described what she called a breakthrough moment when LP spontaneously recalled in conversation an important event that she had captured with HippoCamera. It was a kayak ride at her friend's cottage. And we were excited about this because it suggested that HippoCamera might support flexible retrieval of these meaningful experiences. So we clearly have a lot more work to do here, but it provides an encouraging first indication that even patients with really severe memory impairments might benefit from HippoCamera. Okay, so as we gained more experience working with HippoCamera data, we started to get the sense that there might be something more going on here with the intervention than just this improved recall of episodic details. It seemed to us that there was this shift in the emotional tone that participants expressed as they shared their memories with us. So as a first pass at this, we took those memory transcripts from all of our participants, and we performed a natural language analysis using Vader. This was pre-LLMs, but this analysis that characterizes the extent to which participants recalled their memories using positive emotional language. And here we found that these replayed events were recalled with significantly more positivity. And I think that this is a really important finding because we know that declining memory contributes to depression, and depression can contribute to declining memory, but positive reminiscence, this focusing on positive life events, can produce improvements to both cognition and overall emotional well-being in dementia. So it's another clue that this might be a tool that we can use to support individuals who have more severe memory impairments. And we see some of this positivity in what our participants told us directly. So in the words of Alf, he said, "It was very motivational. I started to have more confidence in myself and started to be more aware of things around me," suggesting that the app made people pay more attention to those ordinary events of life as they decided if the current moment was worth recording. Our participant, Donna, indicated that this increased focus on her life made her life seem more interesting and positive. She said she started to find little things already in her life so that life didn't seem so dull. Her whole day felt better. And often participants like Marilyn told us just that the app got her out of the house so she would get more flavor in her day and her reminders. And finally, Gus, a pilot participant in the early stages of Alzheimer's disease, gave us really inspiring feedback and highlighted the fact that this generation of older adults is eager to embrace technology to preserve their cognition. He said, "I'll remember for all my life how much I'll grow from this. I still want to grow. I still want to learn. I want to know what's going on."
You want us, let's say, learn Japanese. Would this help you?
Probably that's more semantic memory, but you know what? I think I'll take the questions at the end, and then we can get to that. Yeah. Okay, so we that was just one of our studies that we've done. We've replicated these memory benefits of replay with HippoCamera in multiple studies now, consistently observing effects that lasted on the order of months. But in our next study, we really wanted to push this out and see how long the benefits would extend, framing this question not in terms of months, but in terms of years. And we also wanted to conduct a more systematic qualitative analysis of participants' experiences using HippoCamera. So 3.5 to 6 years after completing one of our HippoCamera studies, Brian invited each of our older adult participants back into the lab. And our participants love Brian. I mean, he's a lovely guy, who's not to love. And we had pretty decent retention of participants who came back and did the study again. So he presented participants with 3 different types of cues. There were HippoCamera cues that had been replayed, HippoCamera cues that had been hidden, and events that participants had simply logged in a calendar around the same time period. And he asked participants to rate their subjective re-experiencing of the events. But in addition, we also wanted a more holistic understanding of the experience of using HippoCamera for them. So here, Brian conducted a semi-structured interview and employed a qualitative analysis, which was a totally new experience for me and the lab. Up until this point, we had really only done quantitative studies. So we were growing and expanding our skill set. Okay, so first looking at these quantitative measures, their ratings of their subjective re-experiencing. So we asked participants to rate the degree to which they recollected each event, and we found that the benefit of replay with HippoCamera was still evident years after they had discontinued use. So we're finding this benefit here. These replayed memories are better than the baseline hidden memories, and they're better in terms of the subjective re-experiencing than the calendar memories. And further, HippoCamera events, we found a similar pattern in these what we call phenomenological judgments. So participants indicating how accessible the memory felt, how coherent it felt, how close it felt psychologically, and how vivid. With replayed events being remembered with the richest and the strongest phenomenology, suggesting that either it's that HippoCamera encoding process or the richness of the HippoCamera cues themselves that is helping to support memory here at retrieval. Okay, but what I think was even more important, I mean, it was really exciting to replicate those memory benefits after such a long delay. But what I think was even more important was what emerged from these semi-structured interviews. So using a reflexive thematic analysis, Brian identified 2 broad themes, but for today I'm just going to focus on one of these themes, which is perceived benefits of using HippoCamera. So participants told us that the act of recording helped them focus on the event, asking them why this particular event was important or interesting, and that this helped the memory lock in. So this person says, if I hadn't taken the video, I don't think I'd remember those events. You're more focused on the event, thinking, oh, this is important, I should take the video, or it's interesting, I should take the video. So that locks it in better. We also saw that participants commented on more extended benefits beyond just memory. So they told us that there's more happening in your life than we often notice, and that they now try to remember those things instead of letting them slip by. And they also commented on how reminiscing with HippoCamera helped them see what is important in their lives. I think this is a beautiful quote. Many of these serve as a reminder of what in the fullness of time has come to be all that matters to me, and it is the people I share my life with. And that reminiscing on these things can bring joy and laughter. And others talked about how important memories are. One reflection in particular really stood with me. A participant said, your life is all about memories. And this reminded me of a quote from one of my favorite playwrights, Tennessee Williams, who wrote, has it ever struck you that all life is memory, except the one present moment that goes by so quick you can hardly catch it going? And I think that's what HippoCamera is really tapping into, this idea that even fleeting moments can become lasting parts of who we are if we just simply take the time to stop and notice and reflect on them. So to summarize these HippoCamera results, we found that repeated memory reactivation with HippoCamera selectively improved memory for these episodic details of real-life events, even after very long delays. In the brain, we found that HippoCamera enhanced these patterns of hippocampal activity. We found replayed memories were recalled with more positive emotional language. And our qualitative analyses of participants' perspectives years after the intervention highlighted this deep connection between memory and well-being. And ultimately, this simple act of noticing and revisiting everyday memories can ground us to our experiences and to the intimate link between our memories and our identities. So this feedback that we got from our participants kind of made us wonder whether HippoCamera is more than a memory intervention. This increased focus on the events of our lives might have broader effects on lifestyle and well-being. So in the last study that I'm going to talk about just very quickly, we tried to tackle that. So we're asking our HippoCamera users to go through their days with the intention of capturing just one special event that they want to remember. And this can serve as encouragement to engage in those unique activities, or just to simply find something special about a routine event that otherwise would have gone unnoticed. And we think that this might have benefits beyond memory to reducing boredom, to mood, and so on. So my postdoc, Melissa Mead, designed a study to get at this. And she took advantage of a really unique moment in time, the pandemic lockdowns, when we were all stuck at home, living these really monotonous lives that lacked these distinctive events. So this was an 8-week intervention conducted during the lockdowns of the summer of 2020, if you can remember back to those days. Participants used HippoCamera continuously to capture events from their lockdown lives, recording and replaying once per day. And we encouraged them to record events that were distinct from their usual routines. And I want to emphasize this unique event could be something small. Like we weren't asking older adults to like climb the CN Tower or, like find an endangered animal or anything, but just like something really simple, like take a walk in your neighborhood or connect with an old friend. Just something that was different, even in a small way from the status quo. And then we asked them to really reflect on how this was different and to commit to remembering it with HippoCamera. And then at the end of each day throughout the intervention, participants completed a series of questions that assessed their emotions of the day, as well as perceived passage of time and the day's overall uniqueness. And then at the end of each 4-week period, we administer the autobiographical interview over Zoom, assessing memory for those recorded events, as well as a separate set of questions where we're trying to get at the uniqueness of each event. So our key question here pertained to the impact of event uniqueness on memory and well-being. So we really did need to quantify the uniqueness of each event. So we asked participants to tell us how frequently they engaged in that type of event and how typical the location was where that event took place. And we asked them to report each day the typicality of the overall day in which that event was situated. And then we normalized and combined these events to make a uniqueness composite score that was associated with each individual event. And we're going to take this uniqueness composite score and we're going to use it to understand how the uniqueness of an event interacts with memory and well-being. So perhaps not surprisingly, I could have asked you all to make a prediction, but I think you probably would have predicted this, that unique events are better remembered. That is, events that have higher uniqueness composite scores show more, people remember more semantic and episodic details for both of these events. The effect is a little bit stronger for the episodic details, but we're finding more unique events, there's just more to remember to them. But our primary question was whether breaking out of this pandemic routine would affect well-being on a day-to-day basis. So we looked at the relationship between the uniqueness composite score and those daily well-being measures. And here we found that days with more unique events were associated with more positive affect. Days that were more unique were associated with less boredom and were perceived to pass by faster. So we have a lot more to do here to unpack these findings, but they just suggest that that engaging in and focusing on just one novel event per day can meaningfully advance quality of life. And I think this work touches on this intimate connection between memory for the events of our lives and our well-being overall. And it is an encouragement to just try to find one little unique thing about your day every day and to commit to remembering it. So, we back up our photos, our emails, our files, but we rarely invest in preserving our memory for our own lived experiences. And maybe I don't know why this is our culture. Maybe it feels too hard, or we assume that once a moment passes, it's gone. But I really want to leave you with a hopeful message, and that's that it doesn't take much to preserve these memories. So just a few minutes a day with HippoCamera led to real lasting benefits. These improved memories that lasted up to 6 years, along with measurable changes in the hippocampus. And just as important, or more importantly, we saw that this increased focus on memory through HippoCamera, or even just reflection, was tied to greater well-being and a stronger sense of meaning in life. So if you want to use HippoCamera, you can download it for free on the app stores. It's totally free. Thank you for your taxpayer dollars for supporting this research. But you also don't need an app to start. Just take a moment to pause. Pay attention to what makes an experience unique, what makes it meaningful, what makes it relate to who you are and who you want to be as a person. And then come back to it later with a photo, a note, or even just in your mind. That simple act of noticing and revisiting can anchor you to your experiences, to your memories, and even to your sense of self. And, I just want to leave with this thought, and it's that our memories are our lives. And by creating richer memories, you can create a richer life. I want to thank the whole team. An incredible team effort on this. Brian Hong worked with me for 13 years before I need to update that slide. He just started at the University of Guelph. Chris Martin and Melissa Mead were also postdocs in the lab. An incredible team of tireless undergraduates. U of T undergraduates are the best of the best, and they made this research possible with all of their work with those autobiographical interviews. And thank you so much for listening.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
Can this help you to learn the sleep?
So the question is, can this help you learn Japanese? I mean, to the extent that like being able to remember a single episode that was spoken in Japanese, helps you. But this is about moments, right? This is about an experience, and learning a language is kind of the opposite of that. It's not that kind. However, there's links between, so sometimes if I'm trying to remember how to say a word in another language, I'm going to remember the time that I learned that word. Or, so they're not mutually exclusive, but this is a different kind of memory system. Yeah.
Sorry, 1 sec, hold on.
There's okay, but
Thanks a lot.
All right, great talk, by the way. So as I understand it, the hippocampus is kind of like an encoder embedder and places this in long-term memory. So my big question is, how much do we remember overall? Because could this be manipulated? I.e., if someone using AI, for instance, created pictures or videos and then did this with the hippocampus, does the recording, would it understand the deep brain that this didn't happen in 1980, that this was created? That's my question.
Yeah, it's a great question. So just to paraphrase, I think you're asking, with AI, or indeed with other methods pre-AI, can you give somebody these rich cues and get them to believe something happened that didn't actually happen? Absolutely. Yes. I could give you a false memory if you just we spent 20 minutes together. So we need to be careful here, but we also just need to accept the fact that our memories aren't perfect, and that's how it should be. Our memories should adapt with us because we adapt and we reinterpret situations that happened in the past based on what we've learned since. And they shouldn't be these static recollections of the past. So yes, and also I think what this research shows is that we have a lot more memories than we think. The fact that our participants could remember 6 years after the fact, these everyday experiences, this was even in our 2-week study where it was like having a cup of coffee or plowing the driveway again. There's a lot more that's in there. We just need the right cue to pull it out. Yeah.
Yes, you addressed a little bit about what I was wondering. This idea of fixing the memories and turning them as cues, isn't it like freezing memory in like an insect in amber? Memories are like butterflies. They're better off flying and not pinned down as specimens. And here you are proposed, maybe not, I'm misinterpreting perhaps, that these are memory specimens, and those are not alive in the same organic, transformative way as we seem to have them in our own storage of memory. I don't know if this makes sense to you.
It makes perfect sense. I think I agree with everything you said, except that this is freezing them in amber. So yes, memories are like butterflies, and they should change, and they should fly with different groups. And that's one reason why when we replay the memories, we're replaying each time it's a different set of memories that are coming together. And we're asking people to create links across them, to change, to reflect on them, to go back to that moment. And in the context of these other memories that they just experienced, we're treating these memories as these living, breathing things that are changing alongside of you. So we're not trying to crystallize them in time. And indeed, we don't even know what is accurate or not. People could be telling us totally inaccurate things on the autobiographical interview. So long as they're not lying, I don't care. If that is what their memory is for it, then, and it's rich and it's vivid and it's, great, give it to me. Yeah.
Over here.
I'm just wondering if your theory could be stretched to a future application. Let's just say that somebody today is giving public talks, but when they're 90 and their talks are still meaningful, visual cues, if they replay the visual outline of their talk every day or twice a day, do you think that will preserve the content of their talk?
Yeah, I mean, yes, I do. I think there is too much, though. Like, you can get to a point where, and we had this, there was this one glitch in the app, and one of our participants was like, I'm getting the same two memories. Like, again, it took them before they were like, I don't think this is working correctly. And they were correct. It was working incorrectly. If you just focus on, just replay the same thing again and again, it can become about the cue itself and not about the memory. And so, to the butterfly point, that is, we want this to be, this is the tip of the iceberg about the whole event. It's not about just this video. So I don't think that like sitting and thinking about watching the same video every single night is good. You want to do it on a kind of a repeated schedule, and you just want to like a little bit of it. And that's why HippoCamera cues are so short. It's just meant to be a little bit of the event. And then you let your brain complete the rest of the event with what you remember or what you've updated based on what you've learned since it happened. Yeah.
So I found it really interesting when you mentioned that depression affects memory loss, challenges with memory and vice versa. So in community mental health, it's really common where people who have clinical depression, or also people who are on a cocktail of psychiatric medications, where that side effect of cognitive impairment and or challenges with memory is really common. Has there been any research by you or your team on whether the HippoCamera has helped or could help people who are dealing with those over the long term?
Yes, yeah, we are just about to submit such a study. So it was in a sample, 2 samples actually, of undergraduates with varying expressions of a mood disorder. And HippoCamera, those individuals with more severe depression showed a greater benefit from replay with HippoCamera. And they rated the replayed memories as being more emotionally positive. And they were more vivid. So in general, depression can make your memories much more semanticized, and this really mitigated that effect. Chris Martin, my former postdoc, now a colleague at Florida State, did this in depressed older adults. So geriatric depression is something really common and not studied as nearly as much as it should be. And he found I can't remember the length of his intervention, 2 weeks? Anyway, he found it was not that long, a swing in terms of their depression scores after using it. So there's something, the idea is this overgeneral memory and depression. It's like kind of trying to keep the memories away, because memories can be painful, right? And so I'm pushing it away. But this is like exposure therapy in a safe way. So record these positive emotions these positive memories, and then focus, be exposed to them, and then you kind of rewire that. We're about to launch a study using this in social anxiety as well, as a way to kind of rewrite these schemas. Like a lot of mental, something like social anxiety, for example, is underpinned by these maladaptive self-beliefs, which aren't accurate. Like I'm unlovable, I'm awkward, I always make a fool of myself. So we're trying to use HippoCamera to give vivid examples of when those maladaptive self-beliefs are incorrect, and so we can update and overwrite them.
Morgan, do we have time for 3 more questions?
Great.
Okay, and then we'll stop there. Okay, this gentleman here. Did you have a question? Have one? No? Someone here? And then I had 2 over here. So we'll do order. Okay, we'll do 2 and then 1.
Great. Thank you very much for a fascinating presentation. You mentioned keeping memories on your hippocamp and those memories being preserved. What about the non-hippocamp memories? Do you lose those? And what happens if you lose your camera?
Those are great questions. So if you lose your camera, you're fine. Like that, so long as you've rehearsed them enough times. I mean, that's what we looked at. The 3-month those huge benefits we saw, we took their phone away at that, like not their actual phone. We didn't steal our participants' phone. We had given them a HippoCamera phone and we took that back. So these are in their brains. They're in their minds. We're working with the memory system. We're just kind of juicing it along, right? We don't, and then your other question was a really good one, which was, I believe you asked, what about the other memories that aren't part of? And it's really hard to test that for reasons that I won't get into, because we don't know what ground truth is. It's hard to have a baseline comparison. However, we have some data and a really, really strong prediction that those other memories are benefited. Memories are like these webs of association. So if I remember one thing, that's going to trigger things that are connected to it. If I'm paying better attention to the events of my life as I'm going around trying to say, is this something I'm going to capture? That's going to have a halo effect on other events that happen around the same time. So using your memory is good for your memory. It's not a zero-sum game. This isn't like, So try to remember more and everything will be better. Not everything, but I'm a memory scientist, so everything.
Confirm it's Chris Martin out of Florida State that did the research around depression and the HippoCamera?
That's right, yes, yeah.
Looking at the positive impact potential.
Yeah, we did some too. He did his in older adults and ours was in University of Toronto students.
And has he published that in a...
No, he's not yet, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Do you
it's
have any
pilot
idea?
data for a grant, but yeah, he's going to soon.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, he'd be, if you want to reach out to him, he'd be, yeah.
Thank you so much for the presentation.
Yeah.
Also incredible app. I have two technical questions. Just thinking about my grandma and some of the elderly people, I might tell them about this app. So the first question is, can people that do not speak English, let's say a different language, Ukrainian or Russian, I'm from there, use this app as well in their native language?
We just need, do you want to translate it for us? Because we have the capacity. We have it in French, we have it in Thai. It's wherever we have a collaborator. Okay. I actually think with AI, we might be able to like get it too. Yeah, so if there's like a strong use case, our development team, we can put it.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah, so we have the ability, it's just not, it hasn't been translated into those languages yet.
You guys can do
Yeah,
it. So.
yeah, if you wanted to like read it over for us to make sure we're not like saying anything
I can
like
help
totally,
if anything. Yeah.
I'd have no idea.
Yeah, I know that my grandma might ask if she doesn't speak English. But
Yeah.
another question is, this is also, she might ask like for privacy concerns. And personally, I
Totally.
think that this is a great
Yeah.
app, even for research purposes
Yeah.
from the users. And I'm sure
Yeah.
all the social apps that we're using, they're
Yes.
collecting data and we
Yeah.
agree to it. Can this app also be used just outside of research people that you're using?
Yeah.
Can you still use that information?
Oh, can we? Yeah, it's so it's on the app stores. We cannot see, like if your grandma downloaded it or if any of you download it, we cannot see your memory cues. It's only, those are like to totally private. Like it's all HIPAA compliant, and the team can only, my research team can only see the cues if someone has explicitly consented to share those cues with us. And it's overseen by the research ethics office. And then when they're out of the study, their cues go back out and we don't have access to them anymore. We were like, had
both
to like.
good and bad for research.
These are like really intimate moments and you have to be careful with them. So we're like, the privacy is really, really
Thank
tight.
you so much.
Yeah. Great, thank you.
Thank you so much.
You bet.
Thank you, everyone. Yes. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon and staying a little bit longer to ask some questions. I hope you're enjoying your time at Alumni Reunion. We hope that you'll attend more. There is a Alumni Fest tomorrow on King's College Circle. If you haven't been there lately, it has been redone in the last couple of years. It's beautiful. It's worth coming by. There'll be lots of people out and about, so we hope that we will see you. And if you want any more information, I'm sure that the team would be happy to talk to you on your way out if you have any questions. But thank you so much, Morgan. That was really interesting, and I know I'm downloading it for my grandma too. So, thank you.